Hello everybody, Scotia here with a quite different video for today. It's a video that I said I was going to do quite a while ago. If you watched this video, you'll have known that I said I was wanting to do more content surrounding JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and I wanted to do this because I wanted to start reviewing either part 6, the anime, or part 9, the manga, whichever came first. I wanted to do reviews on it, and I thought doing a video like this where I just talked about what I liked about the series, kind of my favourite parts, my favourite characters, just so that when I did review these things, you would get a better understanding of kind of where I'm at with some things, you know, if I critique some things. Hopefully this video might help in you understanding where I'm coming from. So that's the intent of this video. This is a different format for me. I know it's a different format for you. You know, I've only really shown my face in the video I just mentioned. That's the only time I've really shown myself on here. I'm more used to just sitting and recording without a camera. So this is weird for me as well. Hopefully it goes all right. Apologies if things are weird and kind of don't go right. I'm learning as I go, really. So yeah, let's just go. So I actually forgot to mention why I'm doing this different format instead of the usual. No, you just hear my voice and I put footage on the screen, and it's because I don't get copyrighted, basically. I don't want to use too much footage from the anime or too much screens from the manga. So I will be using some. I will be using some images. I might use clips or some music from the show if I feel like, you know, being courageous. But yeah, so that's basically why. Hopefully you understand, hopefully you're okay with that. It's really kind of just to protect my own ass, so to speak. So yeah, that's why. So as a heads up, I will be talking openly about spoilers, about certain moments in each part. So if you haven't kept up with the anime yet, I wouldn't recommend watching this video. I would suggest, you know, finishing off the series, then coming back if you want to. In terms of the manga, I know not everybody reads the manga and they're waiting for the anime. They just watch the anime. So in that sense, I decided to have a queue of when I'm about to talk about a spoiler in the manga, or just talk about the manga in general if you want to stay completely blind on parts 7 and 8. And I will be doing that by having a Joseph run across the screen. So when you see Joseph running, that's your cue that I'm about to talk about the manga. I will also have a timestamp come up on the screen when I stop talking about the manga, so if you just want to completely skip it and, you know, move on to the next part, like, that's entirely fine as well. You can do that if you want. So hopefully there's enough of a preemptive warning in this video for you to know when and where I'm going to be talking about spoilers for the manga. In the case of the anime though, sorry, I would just suggest watching it instead of listening to me. So I felt like a good place to start with this video would be ranking the parts of the series from my least favourite to my most favourite. And I want to preface this by saying that I don't think any particular part of JoJo is bad. I think even at its worst, it's still a good quality show. There's still good quality moments in it, even if it's not as good as other stuff that happens in the show. And I say this because unfortunately my least favourite part is part 1, Phantom Blood. And I feel like this is the least favourite part for quite a lot of people. Not because it's bad or because the quality isn't as consistent or as good as the other parts of JoJo, but because it's just, there has to be a bottom level, there has to be a flaw when it comes to ranking parts. And I think for most people, part 1 is that bottom level, it is that flaw, because everything after it was just so much better. Like, it just, JoJo just keeps going up and up and up and up in quality, and unfortunately you just kind of have to live with part 1 being kind of Araki trying to find his footing and trying to figure out what he wants this series to be. And there's quite a lot of elements I like about part 1. I like Jonathan a lot. I think Dio's a great villain. I love the start of the show when you see Jonathan and Dio growing up and you see their rivalry and how much, you know, they keep clashing across their childhood. I think some of the fights are some of the best in the series. I love the fight with Jonathan and Dio in the Joestar mansion as it burns down. I think it's a great fight. It's just other elements of it are just so basic, and I say basic not because they're boring, it's just because they're just not as good as other parts. You know, when I think about the characters of part 1, you have Jonathan, Dio, Speedwagon and Zeppeli, and that's kind of it. I mean, you have other characters, you have like Straight So and Dyer and Tom Petty, but those are characters that kind of show up like really close to the end. They don't really do a lot, and then that's kind of it. Like, outside of Straight So, you don't see the rest of them again. And yeah, it's just, it's still good. I enjoy it a lot. I used to, I mean, when I first watched part 1, I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, like, I'll watch it again. But I have watched it, I have watched part 1 again, and I've read it as well in the manga, and I think it's quite enjoyable. There's a lot of good elements to it. I'll happily read it, and I think I think how short it is helps a lot with that. You know, it's very easily readable or like watchable. Like it doesn't take that long to read or watch part 1. And I think that kind of goes a long way, because if it was as long as like part 1 or part 2 or part 3, it would just be like, it would just drag, because there's just really not a lot there to hold it together. And I think the length really helps it a lot in that case. But yeah, it's just, it really is unfortunately just a case of just, you know, everything after it is just so much better, that you kind of have to have this bottom level when you rank JoJo. You kind of have to have this floor where kind of like this is the basis for everything. It's kind of like everything either has to be above this or below this. And I think for part 1 and the rest of JoJo, everything is just above it, in terms of just leaps and bounds above it. And it's a shame, like I say, because I like Jonathan, I like Dio, I like the rivalry, I like elements of it, I like some of the moments in part 1. It's just, you just know there's better things coming, and that's why unfortunately it has to be the bottom. And now we move on to the next part in my rankings, and this is actually quite a recent change. I only recently swapped this with the part that I'll be talking about next, and I'll get into why I swapped it later. But the next part is part 2, Battle Tendency. And this is kind of why I wanted to emphasize that just because I rank a part low doesn't mean I think it's bad, because I love part 2. I love Joseph. I think part 2 is a very fun part. I love the story of it and how it goes, and the characters are great. But unfortunately, it's kind of a similar thing with part 1, where it's like everything after it is just so much better and so much more, you know, kind of just out there in terms of what they do. And I think a big part of that is because of stands. And it's, for a while, like, I ranked this part higher than it is now, because I loved Joseph so much. And I love Joseph so much, actually. I even bought the Nendero of him. Not sure if you can see that. I bought that because I love Joseph so much. He's still my favorite JoJo to this day. I mean, maybe Jolene will change that. I am quite excited to see her, but I just think Joseph is just such a drastic improvement over Jonathan. And I love Jonathan, don't get me wrong. I love Jonathan for the reasons that make him Jonathan, but Joseph was just, he was such a needed change up in terms of the main character. He's witty, he's charming, he's such a cerebral fighter, he's a great tactician in battle. I love how he's always 2 steps ahead of his opponent. His quirk of his trait, of being able to finish his opponent's sentences, it just makes for a more enjoyable story, because you're following a character that is just so, you just want to see more of Joseph, you just want to see more of him, you want to see him, you know, win all these battles, you want to see him interact with more people. And it's just, I would take 5 more parts of just young Joseph. I just love him that much. But unfortunately, I think stands really do, like, stands not being there, I think really hurts part 2 a lot, because stands add so much to JoJo's, to the part where it's like, I don't think you could really get rid of stands anymore, because they're just so integral to how the series works. And I think part 1 and 2 really suffer a lot by not having them. I mean, I do like Hamon. I don't love it. I think it's an interesting concept. I think especially part 2, it's used like really well. But I feel like, you know, after part 2, it's kind of like, where do you really go with Hamon after this? Because I mean, once you beat Kars, who is kind of like, you know, the ultimate being, and he's, you know, he made the stone masks, and then he eventually learns how to use Hamon. It's kind of like, where do you go after that? And I think it was the right decision to move on. But again, I'll talk more about stands when I get to part 3. But it's a shame, because I do want to put this part higher, but I feel like I kind of have to be truthful to myself and be like, I would only rank it higher because of Joseph. And I love Joseph, but he can't really save how basic not having a stand makes these parts kind of feel in comparison to the others. So that's why I kind of rank it this low. I would love to rank it higher, but I kind of have to like accept that like it's not as a gripping show, I guess. Not gripping, I don't know. I don't really know the words for it, but like I just feel like stands add so much, and them not being there, it just kind of makes things seem more kind of basic in comparison. But I mean, again, not a knock against part 2, but love part 2. Such a fun story, such great characters like Caesar, Lisa, Stroheim. It's just such a great cast, such a great improvement. It is literally an improvement over part 1 in almost every way. I'd even go as far as to say every way. But I think Kars is a pretty weak villain, really. I do like Kars. Again, I like Kars a lot, and he's probably better than most villains in other shows and stuff I've watched. But when you're following Dio, it's a tough act to follow. I mean, when you're basically in between Dio, it's a tough act to follow, and I feel like he kind of is one of the things that drags it down. But I mean, all the Pillar Men are great. I mean, Kars, ECDC, Wamu, they're all great characters, especially Wamu. Like, Wamu was such a great character, and his fight scene and his death and all that was just really, really, really well done. And yeah, I mean, I'm like gushing. It's this weird thing with JoJo. I'm gushing about it and how much I love it, and it's the second to last part in my rankings. That's just the beauty of JoJo. That's something that I loved so much that I've read several times, I've watched several times. I would put it so low, but it just speaks volumes of just how much better the series keeps going and going. So yeah, sad to put part 2 so low, but I feel like it's kind of just the nature of Stan's not being there, and kind of Hamon just kind of being so kind of nah to me. I feel like I have to put it down though. But again, I wouldn't say that that's indicative of the quality of the show. Absolutely, by all means, if you skip part 2, or if you think, oh, I just want to get to the stands, please at least watch part 2. I mean, watch all of them, but give part 2 a try. It is really, really worth it. And now we move on to the next part in my rankings, and it is indeed part 3, Stardust Crusaders. And I originally had this switched with part 2 for quite a while, because believe it or not, part 3 was actually the only part of JoJo's that I just stopped watching for a while, because I just got that bored of the repetitive stand fights, and I just lost interest. And I've kind of held that against part 3 for quite a while now, which I recently decided isn't that fair, because I loved the second half of part 3. I thought everything in Egypt was incredibly fun. I thought the stand fights were great. I thought the stand users were great. It's just the first half of part 3 is just the opposite to me. I thought a lot of the stands weren't as interesting. I hated most of the stand users. I thought they were incredibly lame, uninteresting, boring designs. To me, the bottom, the absolute worst kind of like part of part 3, and I mean maybe even JoJo itself, is that orangutan on the ship in the first half of part 3. I hate that part. I hate that fight. I hate that stand user. Everything with the shower, it's just the worst. But I've recently kind of been coming around to the first half of part 3. I've been watching it again recently because I've been trying to get my brother into JoJo, and we're currently about just under halfway through the first half of part 3, and I haven't been hating it yet, which is weird, because I mean, I recently reread the part 3 manga, and I actually kind of prefer the manga of part 3. Like, if I was to consume part 3 in some way, if I was to, you know, watch or read it again, I would honestly read the manga before I would watch the anime again. And I don't really know the reason why. I think because I feel like maybe with like reading the manga, you can kind of set your own pace. You know, how fast you read can determine how quickly you get through parts, and I think that kind of helped with the pacing. Whereas with the anime, you're gonna have to like watch it for as long as it is. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if that's a thing other people feel when they read mangas compared to watching animes, but that's how I felt while reading part 3. And I don't know, I kind of feel like maybe knowing the order of things and knowing how long certain aspects of the show go on for, like if I'm watching a fight, say for example, me and my brother, we just watched the Yellow Temperance fight, and it was like knowing, and I actually quite like that fight. I liked it back when I first watched part 3, but you know, like knowing the order of how it went, and like knowing when that fight ends, there's the specific moment, I think kind of helps with watching part 3 again, especially the first half, because now I'm not waiting for something to end. Like when I was watching that fight with the orangutan, I was like, please, can this just end? And then I think the next fight in the hotel room, I was like, is this like when is this gonna end? And I think knowing that now kind of helps a lot with like rewatching. But yeah, I did hold the pacing of the first half of part 3 against it for a while, and there's still elements of part 3 I'm not as keen on. I think the cast, while good, I do like the cast of part 3, but there is a significant imbalance in which characters get priority compared to others, which is a known problem and something even Araki himself has commented on. I mean, the part 3 is called Polnareff's Bizarre Adventure for a reason, and it's this thing where like I like Kakyoin, but I feel like he's not used well, if that makes sense. Like, I like the character, but I feel like he could have been used better. I really dislike that he sat out pretty much most of the second half of part 3. I felt that was a weird decision, because it's just, he was already a character that wasn't utilized that well at that point. And I mean, the times when he is used is great, but like when it's constantly just, when almost every stand fight is Polnareff and Jotaro and Polnareff and then Polnareff and then Jotaro and Jotaro, it's like, and then like, oh, like, and then like Kakyoin will get one and Avdol will get one and then Joseph will get one. And it's like, yeah, and it's like you enjoy it, because like, oh, it's somebody that's not Polnareff or Jotaro fighting them, and then in the next fight it's back to Polnareff or Jotaro. You're just like, oh, come on. And I love Polnareff and Jotaro, both liked them a lot. Jotaro, I felt like I didn't like him at first. It took me a while to get used to Jotaro. Now I love him. I rank Jotaro quite highly on my JoJo's list. But I think that he benefits a lot from appearing in other parts, in being in, you know, parts 4, 5, and 6. Well, I'm assuming with part 6, I haven't watched it yet, obviously. But yeah, actually, specifically, the moment I started liking Jotaro a lot was his I'd say fight with Darby the Gambler, which is in the second half of part 3. I loved that fight, and that was one of the moments where like Jotaro kind of clicked for me. I'm like, oh, this guy isn't just a moody asshole. Like, he's actually as like cerebral as Joseph is. He just does it in a different way. That's when I kind of started to respect Jotaro for who he is more, instead of just wishing he was Joseph, which I think I did for a lot of part 3. But now I think Jotaro's a great character. He's just different, and I appreciate that he's so different. And that's the thing with JoJo, is that no two JoJos are the same. I feel like everybody has their own quirks and traits that make them unique. And but with Jotaro, it takes a while to get used to him. But yeah, the part as a whole is just really fun. It's a great ending to what I would call the Dio trilogy. You know, parts 1, 2, and 3, kind of, you know, wrapping up that storyline. Obviously, Dio would kind of affect parts 4, 5, and 6, but I'll get to them later. But yeah, it's just a very dramatic part. There's parts that are real tearjerkers, especially towards the end. It's just a great finale. It's very well done, and I do need to put more respect on its name. I feel like I do need to kind of acknowledge how good part 3 is more, which I do already. I know, like I said, I love the second half, but yeah, I think there's a reason why part 3 is so popular, and who knows? Maybe in the future I might put it up, because obviously the next part, which I'll be talking about it in a minute, I have feelings on that I'm mixed on. So who knows? Maybe in the future I'll swap part 3 and the next part around. But yeah, great part. It's just, man, that pacing just hurts it a lot, and I feel like if part 3 was trimmed down, it would really benefit from that. But yeah, great part. And now we move on to the middle point of my list, and I don't think any other JoJo part is as perfect for the middle point as this part is. And as you can tell by the Joseph running across the screen, this is the first manga part I'm going to be talking about, because the middle point of my list is part 8, JoJolion. And this is a weird part, and I'm going to use that word a lot because there's no other word I can really think of that describes it as perfectly as weird. And I honestly don't even really know how my true feelings are on this part just yet. I haven't reread it yet, like all the way through start to finish, because it only ended in August. I think I'm going to wait for the coloured scans to kind of catch up so I can read the whole thing in colour. But this part for me is a part of really high highs and really low lows. And this is the second part post reboot, post new universe. Part 7 was the start of that, which I will talk about eventually. And part 8, I think one of the biggest things that I think really hinders it is that it uses a lot of elements from part 4, and I don't mind that. I don't mind them using elements. I think every JoJo part kind of takes from the others, obviously, you know, as the series goes on. But part 8, like, using so much from part 4, like having the same name of the JoJo, having the same location as the JoJo. Obviously part 8 and part 4, both JoJos are called Josuke Higashikata. Both part 4 and part 8 are set in the Japanese town of Morio. I think it really hurts part 8 because when I think of Josuke Higashikata, I think of the part 4 Josuke, which is a shame because I really like the part 8 Josuke. I think he's a great character. I'm just going to call him Gappy just to kind of differentiate between the two. I really like Gappy a lot. He's a really cool character, and it's a shame because I feel like he's kind of going to live in the shadow of part 4 Josuke because part 4 Josuke is just way more popular. Who knows, that may change if they ever get around to animating part 8, which will probably be like 10 years from now. Maybe that'll change. Maybe part 8 will be more popular. I doubt it, personally. But yeah, this whole part is just weird. I never really got the feeling Araki knew where he was going with this part, which is a shame. Because there's elements in this part that I think are very cool and interesting, and a lot of them kind of go nowhere. I mean, I think a big part of that is because this part lasted so long. If you don't know, part 8 started in 2011, and obviously I just said it finished in August, so it was 10 years long this part lasted. And I think that really hurt the part as a whole, because you would get characters that appeared in like 2013 that just never came back, and it's like, and I don't blame Araki for kind of like forgetting, like, oh, there's a character I had in the manga like 5 years ago. I just completely forgot about him. I mean, like, other manga authors do it. I mean, quite a notable one is Akira Toriyama completely forgot about Launch in Dragon Ball. She doesn't appear in Dragon Ball Z because he just completely forgot about her, you know, because that series went on for so long. And I think it's a similar thing happened with Araki, and it's a shame because there's a lot of cool characters in part 8 that just never come back, or they're not really used as well. And I just think it's a shame because part 8 has a lot of potential. I think part 8 could have been the best part potentially for me if the highs were consistent the whole way through. Because as I said, there's a lot of high highs. I mean, one of my favorite moments, probably in an entire series, happens in the final chapter of JoJo's, and obviously the one that came out the other month. When the alternate universe Joseph Joestar appears with his humanoid purple hermit stand. That was crazy. I was reading it and losing my fucking mind at that. It was insane. But then you have other moments in part 8, like the Urban Grelia fight, which in my opinion was the worst stand fight in part 8. Because it was just boring. I just didn't like it. That's another thing. I was talking about in part 3 how I didn't like the stand users. I don't think I liked a single enemy stand user in this part. I think they were all in some way lame, or boring, or just not used well, or just had weird designs. But the stands I thought were amazing. I thought a lot of the stands in part 8 are crazy. Like, some of my favorites are I can't remember the name. I think it's either Blue Lagoon or Blue Hawaii, and it's basically the one where it's like people that are affected by it become crazy and start hunting down a particular person, and that fight with Josuke, you know, dealing with that stand, I thought was great. It was a great fight. The user is a utter freak, and it's like, you know, I mean, like, maybe people like it, like people kind of like that kind of like alternate kind of like, you know, the unusual abstract designs. I just think it's weird. I think the whole stuff with rock humans I don't hate it. I think it's an interesting concept, but I kind of wish it was introduced in part 7, or at least hinted at in part 7, because the implication is that rock humans are there for like, have been there for years. Like, they kind of like, they exist alongside humans, but like, obviously with the power of foresight, it's kind of like, well, there was never any in part 7, or they weren't mentioned in part 7. And it's kind of like, you know, I can't really blame Araki for that. I can't blame him for not knowing he was going to use an element in a future part. But yeah, there's just parts of part 8 are just really good, and then there's parts that I think are just like really boring or just straight up bad. And it's like, again, it's such a weird part, and I have it in the middle because there's parts I really like. Like I said, there's parts I really like, there's parts that I don't like, and it's just it's a weirdly inconsistent part. And like I said when I was talking about part 3, maybe I'll put part 3 above it, because I think overall, I think part 3, probably the ending of the last, you know, the ending of part 3, the second half being in Egypt and fighting Dio, I'd say is probably better. But I feel like just the scale of what happens in JoJo's and the stands, like the final stand, like the Wonder of You, is a crazy stand. I really like that stand. Didn't like the user, like I said, I didn't like most of the enemy stand users. But the stand itself was crazy, and just the situations they were getting themselves into with that stand were insane. But it's just, you know, again, I say it, it's very inconsistent, very, very high highs, very low lows, and it's just, it's just a shame because it had the potential to be the best part to me. It could have been the best part, but I just feel like at the same time, from the jump, having it used so much from part 4, like having the same JoJo, like have the same name, having the same town location, I think really just hurts it, and it's a shame to me because it could have been great. And yeah, I don't know, it's hard to kind of describe because, like I said at the start, I don't really know exactly my own feelings on it, and it's like kind of in my head, I'm kind of like I'm thinking of things I want to talk about, but then I'm like contradicting themselves in my own head. Like, do I really think that way? And it's hard to kind of really talk about it. I think it's definitely a part I'm going to have to come back to at some point. Maybe I'll do a video on it some other day where I kind of just go and just solely talk about part 8 and why I think certain things about it. But yeah, at the moment, I feel like the middle part is kind of where it belongs because, like I said, parts I loved, parts I didn't love. But yeah, that said, I'm still excited for part 9. It seems like it's going to be more of a direct sequel to part 8, which I think could either be great or it could be bad, but I guess we'll see. So we're in the upper echelon of my ranking list now because we're in the top 3, and this next part is one that I've kind of seen mixed things about online. People either seem to like it or don't like it, and I quite like this part. And this part is part 5, Golden Wind, or Vento Arrero, if you want to use the original name. I probably butchered that. And this part, I think, is a very fun part. It's, to me, as I was saying with JoJolion, like JoJolion has high highs and low lows. I feel like everything in part 5 is kind of just, the highs are good and the lows aren't bad. And by that I kind of mean, like, I don't think there's really any specific moment in part 5 that blows my mind or is like such amazing quality that I'm like, but I don't think there's any part of part 5 where I'm like, this is utter shit, I hate this. It's so, and I kind of like it for that. It's just a very, I feel like I can just watch or read part 5 and just have a good time and just enjoy it for like what it is. And I think a lot of that is helped by its cast, its characters, its setting. The stands, they're all very well used in my opinion. And in fact, the only real issue I have with part 5 is that I feel like Giorno, who's the JoJo for part 5, I feel like Giorno was probably one of, like, I would put him low down in my tier list of like JoJo's. Not because I don't think he's bad, I think he's good, he has his moments, but I just feel like when the premise of the JoJo is that this is a character who is a mix of Jonathan and Dio, I don't really feel like they use that to their fullest, and I feel like it's kind of a missed opportunity really. I think Giorno to me is kind of like, he has elements of Jonathan in him, and that's kind of how he is for most of the part, and then it's like randomly he'll just be like Dio. He'll have moments where he acts like Dio, and these happen kind of more towards the start of the part when they're establishing who he is, but as the part goes on, it just kind of like moves more and more like away from that, and I feel like it's an issue I have with the part as a whole. Like, stuff that happens at the start of part 5 doesn't really matter by the end. Like, I think Gold Experience's stand powers, I think, are completely different by the time part 5 ends compared to when it starts, and I think that's the case for quite a lot of it. I think Giorno suffers from that as well, because he starts off, I think when you start part 5, he is a decent mix of Jonathan and Dio, but I think by the end of part 5, he's just kind of this weird kind of meh blend of both, where he's kind of he takes some elements of Jonathan, some elements of Dio, but they're just not really used that well. And I don't want to say he's dull, but he kind of is, and it's a shame because I like Giorno a lot, and there's moments where he's really cool and I really like him, but he's definitely somebody who has to rely on his supporting cast to kind of help boost him in the part up, which they do perfectly. I mean, the cast of part 5 is great. You've got Bruno, Abacchio, Mister, Narancia, Fugo, Trish, like some really cool characters in part 5 that I really like a lot. I mean, like, I think Mister's probably top 5, one of my favorite JoJo characters, you know, of the whole series. It's just it's just a shame with Giorno. I feel like he could have been done a lot better than he ended up being. Not to say he's bad, not to say, you know, he's the worst JoJo. Unfortunately, I would still say Jonathan is probably the worst, but again, that's because of how part 1 is just so kind of like, basic because of Araki trying to find his footing. I think, I don't know, Giorno just to me kind of seems like he's trying to be both characters, but I don't think he really ends up being both well at all. I don't know, maybe there's other people who can articulate that point better. I don't hate him. I remember being disappointed because when I first heard that he was basically like Dio and Jonathan infused into one person, or at least had elements of both characters, I was very excited by that because, you know, Jonathan and Dio had such a great rivalry, had such a great relationship in part 1, and to kind of get a mix of that, to get the best of both worlds in one character, it was very exciting for me. And it just didn't live up to my expectations, unfortunately. I don't know if that's my fault, don't know if that's part 5's fault. It is what it is. I also think part 5 also has, again, one of the weaker villains. I do like Diavolo. I think King Crimson is a great stand, confusing stand, but is a great stand. But I think he suffers from just being introduced far too late, which is actually a problem I didn't mention about JoJolion, but that's a thing that JoJolion has as well. JoJolion is worse for it, I think. But Diavolo, it's a shame. I think if Diavolo appeared earlier than he did, I probably would have ranked him higher. Great design, though, at least. I think part 5 is really when, like, Araki got crazy with the designs and started going more out there. Because, I mean, when you look at, like, part 1, or, yeah, I mean, even part 1 to part 4, and then you look at part 5 to part 8, and those designs are just crazy. Like, I think if you look at, like, somebody from part 1, and then you look at somebody from part 8, and it's just like, you think, how are these the same characters? Like, how are these characters from the same show? Sorry. And I think part 5 is the start of that, and I quite like it. I like when they kind of go crazy with it. Obviously, some of the designs in part 8, which I said, but were a bit too out there for me. But yeah, it's just a fun part. It's a part where I don't really have strong opinions about it. I enjoyed it. I liked it. I'll read it again. I'll watch it again as many times as I feel like I want to. It's not a part where I'm kind of like, you know, I'll kind of put it off. I'll happily watch part 5 or read part 5 anytime. And I think because of that, I feel like all the parts that I've already talked about, you know, part 1, 2, 3, and 8, all have issues that kind of like knock it down a bit. But I feel like part 5 is the first part where it's like I really don't have any issues, but at the same time, I don't really have anything I particularly like love about it. Like, I mean, I do love some of the characters. Like I said, like Mister's a top 5 character for me, but like, it's not enough to elevate the whole part, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's kind of my feelings about part 5. It's a good part, but not the best, not the worst either. Now we're on to the second JoJo part in my list. This is a part that at one point was my favourite before I started reading the manga. I realised I probably just spoiled what the top part is, but you've probably already guessed it by now. And this part is part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable. And this part is it's just really good. And I kind of almost don't have the words for it. I mean, I will get it across hopefully. But part 4 is it's fun like part 5 was. But I feel like I said with part 5, it's a part where the highs aren't really that high and the lows aren't that low, but it's consistent, but it's still fun. Part 4, to me, the highs are high, and there's pretty much almost no lows to me. I think it's a very consistent part. It's consistently great. Amazing cast of characters, great setting, amazing main villain, my favourite in the entire series, and it's just great. I really cannot describe it any other way. Part 4 is just so fun, and it's such a comfy feeling to me. It's such a warm feeling, just welcoming me to like this town of Morio and the people that live there, and just meeting all these stand users that kind of come out of the woodwork. And then you kind of get the plot line of like there's a serial killer in the town who has a stand, and it's like we've all got to team up, all of these stand users in this town, to defend the town. And it's a story that, like, in the grand scheme of things, isn't important at all. Like, you could get rid of part 4 from JoJo and nothing would really change, but it's such a fun part, I think, because of that, because you can kind of just do whatever with it, because it's not really going to matter. You know, we're not going to be doing anything major like part 3 and have, you know, Dio show up or somebody like Dio, and it's not going to be like part 6. What I've read is the premise of part 6, with kind of like bringing up that old Dio rivalry. It's a very contained story, and I really like it for that. And I feel like it allowed Araki to kind of just do what he wanted to, and within reason, of course. And I just feel like it's just so fun. Like again, I don't have the words for it. It's just such a fun read and such a fun watch to just, you know, see all these characters, you know, go day to day in this town and just the crazy stuff they get up to. Josuke is a great character. He's probably my second favorite JoJo after Joseph. He's just incredibly. There's one thing Araki said about Josuke that I really agree with, and it's especially when you compare him to Jotaro, and like Jotaro to Araki was like Clint Eastwood. That was his inspiration for Jotaro. He was the quintessential what Araki thought a hero was. And Josuke, in comparison, Josuke's just some guy. He's literally like your guy who just lives next door, like just your friend who lives next door, who you just chill and hang out with. And I think that's really what helps Josuke become so likable, because he really is just a guy he's just your friend. He'll just come and hang out and help you out when you need him to. But he just has the spirit and the will of a JoJo, which kind of makes him go like above and beyond for his friends. And I think that really makes him likable. At first, I remember when I first watched Part 4, I actually felt like Josuke kind of got robbed a bit. I felt like he didn't get as much kind of screen time or focus or kind of stuff given to him compared to other characters. But I realized, kind of like watching Part 4 again and then reading it, it's like that's the point. Josuke isn't some grand like guy like Jotaro who's gonna just dive in head first and just go on this grand adventure. He's just the guy who's just, you'll just see him like walking to the bus stop in your town. You're like, oh yeah, that's Josuke. He's just a good guy, and I really like that about him. And I feel like the way it works with Part 4, because you have this guy who's kind of more low key compared to Jotaro, and so to make up for that, you have such a large cast of characters that kind of like, I wouldn't say do the heavy lifting in the same way that Part 5's cast do the heavy lifting for Giorno. I don't think Josuke needs anyone to do any heavy lifting for him. I think he can carry the part well by himself. But the cast of characters being so large and so varied and so great, I think just really helped boost everything else about Part 4. Like it only just adds to it. Like it adds to something that's already great. And it's just so perfectly well done. I really don't think any other part of JoJo, other than the part I'm going to talk about next, really just nails what it's trying to do. Like Part 4 has a thing in mind of what it wants to be, and it just nails it, and it makes it so fun and just enjoyable to watch because of it. And yeah, I don't know, it's just so fun. Again, I don't have the words to really go into it. I wish I did, but I really enjoyed it. It's a really fun part. Great characters, great setting. Everything about it is just great. I really can't describe it any more than that. I mean, you have to watch it for yourself if you haven't already. Part 4 is just really, really good. We're finally here at the end of my JoJo ranking list. We're finally at number 1. And if you haven't already guessed it by process of elimination, and if you haven't guessed it by the Joseph running across the screen, this is the last manga part I have to talk about. And this is by far, in my opinion, the best part of JoJo. And this is Part 7, Steel Ball Run. And this is a part that I think as more people have tuned into JoJo, and as the parts between the anime have gotten longer, I think more people are kind of going to the manga to read it because they just want more JoJo. They want more content. They want to consume more of it because it's such a great series. And and now more people are reading Part 7 because this is a series I see a lot. And I knew going in when I started reading Part 7, I knew this was what people considered to be the best part. And when that happens, I usually kind of like, I end up being disappointed when people be like, oh yeah, this is the best one. Because I'm like, oh, I go into it expecting it to be the best part or the best thing of whatever it is, you know. And then I get it and my expectations are so high, I end up being disappointed. And I was prepared for that with Part 7. I went into Steel Ball Run thinking, I think it'll be good, but I'll probably like Part 4 more. And by the time I finished Part 7, I was like, holy shit, this is hands down the best part of JoJo. Everything that anybody has ever said about this part is completely and utterly true. It is fucking phenomenal. And I don't have the words. I don't think I have enough time. I don't think I have enough battery on this camera. I don't think I have enough power on my laptop for me to go on about how amazing Part 7 is. By all means, if you are fine with skipping Part 6 for now, read Part 7, read Steel Ball Run. It is amazing. So why is it amazing? It is just hard to describe because it was honestly a thing for me. And I'm not going to pretend, okay, I'm not going to lie to you. The start of Part 7 is a bit shaky. it took me a little bit to get into it. It's not just amazing from the first page. There's a bit of a slow start, but from a specific point, and obviously because now I'm in spoiler territory, I'm going to say it, it's when they reach the first checkpoint of the race. From that moment to the end of part 7, I was hooked. I did not hate a single part. I did not think a single part was boring or unnecessary or shit. I thought the entire thing was just amazingly, consistently fucking great. And it is rare for me to kind of be like that, to be so invested in something where it's like, I can't put this down. It took me like a couple of weeks to read it. And it's a long thing. It's like 95 chapters, which they're not short chapters. It took me like a couple of weeks to do it. And it was just because I could not put it down. It was just that good. And it's that thing where like, I feel like I'm kind of hyping it up, but like other people kind of did it for me and I still loved it. It's just that good. And it's again, it's like, it's hard to go into it without kind of spoiling it. And I know I'm going to spoil stuff, but I don't really want to, because I want people to experience it for themselves, because it's just that great. Like, there's just so many moments I could list that had me just losing my mind, just because I was just so invested in what was going on. I was so invested in these characters, so invested in the storyline. And the premise of it is kind of basic, but then it just explodes into this massive thing that just consumes the narrative, but in a way that like you're so invested in it as well. You want to know where this all leads. Hello, just jumping in here to say that I actually didn't realise I was almost out of memory on the SD card in this camera while I was talking about Steel Ball Run. So for the rest of my discussion about it, it will just be my audio, you won't be seeing me. I'll be putting up some pictures of different volume covers and art of Steel Ball Run, just so you've got something to look at. So sorry I didn't realise until after I finished talking about it. So yeah, sorry. Hopefully it's still good. Where this all leads, and like the name suggests, it's a constant race, and it feels like the characters are constantly, everybody's racing towards this one point, and with this point being the end of the story, obviously. But like, it's just everybody's on this constant journey, and I can't emphasize enough, this is probably the best example of the journey matters more than the destination. I think like the journey is by far the most important thing of part 7. The destination, the end goal, not really that important, and that's kind of emphasized. Because there's a thing with the JoJo of part 7, Johnny. He is a character. When I first read part 7, I was kind of like, there's not really a lot to Johnny. He kind of seems like he's aimless. He doesn't really know what he wants. And that's the point. He doesn't know what he wants. He's racing to this goal because he doesn't know what else to do with his life. And to me, that made him better. That he just was so determined to reach this end goal, even though he didn't know what the end goal was, because it was the journey of getting there that was more important. It was the journey that was letting him grow as a person. And I could honestly talk for hours about part 7 and just how incredible it was. The only thing I didn't like about part 7, and this is a major spoiler, so please, if you intend to read this, please stop watching now. The only criticism I had is that one of the character deaths towards the end of part 7 was absolute bullshit. I hated it. It was very poorly done. It was unnecessary. And it really hurt kind of that final enjoyment when I realised that character had actually died. Because I didn't know they died until they died. The character is Hot Pants. Which is probably a funny name if you haven't read it, or if you don't know what JoJo's like. But I was very, very upset. I was more than upset. I was pissed off when I found out that she died. She was a great character, really, really cool. Such a shame. It's such a pointless death. And yeah, that's like the only criticism I have. Everything else was just fucking incredible. I can't like stress enough how amazing Steel Ball Run is. Like I seriously mean it. Once I got past a certain point, I'd never once, because there's at least one stand fight, or at least one arc in every JoJo part where I'm kind of like, I'm not as into this as the others. Don't get me wrong, there are lame stand users and stand fights in this part. Like they're not as great as other. Like there's stand fights that aren't as good as other stand fights, is basically what I'm trying to say. Which is kind of natural. Not every fight is going to be some massive dramatic fight. But like, it's still enjoyable seeing how Johnny and Gyro, the two main characters, deal with the situation, how they kind of grow to trust each other and turn from kind of like people who kind of just naturally joined up and ended up going together in this race, and by the end of it they are just absolute like brothers. By the end of it, it's such a great relationship, and you see the whole time on the journey how it keeps growing, and it's just I can't stop like gushing about it. I'm getting a red battery warning on my cameras, which means I literally can't talk about it anymore. Please read Steel Will Run. I don't think you even really need to read any of the JoJo part. I would just to kind of like know what you're getting into, but I think it's self-contained on its own, where you don't really need to have read, you know, parts 1 to 6. You can start with part 7 and just go from there, because the elements that carry over from other JoJo parts are explained at certain points. So I don't think it's too big of a shock to kind of go from, you know, just to go straight into it. So by all means, please read it. It is great. And that's my JoJo list. Sorry again for the camera cutting out. I really didn't have any idea. I was almost out of footage for that. So yeah, that's my rankings. Obviously, my opinions are my own. I completely understand if people rank parts differently. We're all different people. That's kind of the beauty of us. I'm totally open to discussing other parts about it. You know, if you disagree with some of my, I guess, assessments of JoJo, if you disagree with some of how I interpret things, by all means let me know. I love discussion. I love talking about it. I always enjoy talking with you guys in the comments of my videos. So by all means let me know. I'm more than open to it. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. I know this is probably quite a long one. Hopefully this helps for when I get around to reviewing part 6, the first 12 episodes of part 6, and then eventually the rest of them. Hopefully this helps understand where I'm coming from when I review things. I might have certain opinions or takes on some things that might seem weird if you don't know how I rank the JoJo parts or the rank other things in the JoJo series. So that's why I did this video. So hopefully it was of worth to you. If you enjoyed it, thank you. I always enjoy making these types of videos. So yeah, that's pretty much it from me. I just really wanted to just do this video just to kind of get it out there, what I think about it, because I do enjoy talking about JoJo. It's a part that I don't really get a chance to talk about much online, because I feel like most of the discussion around JoJo is memes, which is fine and fun and all that, but I feel like there's rarely an avenue for me personally where I get to just talk about what I like about each part. So I enjoy doing this. I might do it in the future, you know, if I ever feel like talking about a specific part, I'll probably do this. I'll probably do something like this again. Now that I've kind of, you know, bit the bullet and finally used my camera for something to record myself on a video, I'll probably be doing more videos like this where you see me. So if you enjoyed this type of format, let me know. This was my first time, so sorry if things were shaky or if the cuts were annoying, because I will have to cut around myself, and ahhing and all that. So hopefully I'll get better with time. But let me know if you enjoyed it. If you preferred my normal format where you just hear me and you don't see me, please let me know. I'm always open to feedback on all these types of things. Yeah, that's it. Thank you again, and I'll see you later.
We await your return, warrior.